The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen as I adjusted my tie in the reflection of the microwave. Another early morning routine. Another day, chasing numbers and deadlines. Lisa appeared in the doorway, wrapped in her silk robe, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulder like a wave of gold. She smiled at me, that same dazzling smile that made me fall for her 7 years ago. She handed me my thermos and kissed my cheek, whispering, "Don't work too hard, okay?" To everyone else, we were the golden couple. My career as a financier allowed us to live in a beautiful suburban home, complete with a pool and manicured lawn. Lisa, with her beauty and charm, was the perfect host at our parties, drawing attention like a moth to a flame. I often caught our guests whispering, "They're so perfect together." But beneath the perfection, something had begun to feel off. It started as subtle shifts. Her laughter seemed forced, her kisses less frequent, her time away from home explained by vague errands or late lunches with friends. I brushed it off as my own paranoia. After all, Lisa had given me no reason to doubt her. I loved her. I trusted her. Then came the watch. That morning, on my way to work, I couldn't find my sunglasses. I rummaged through the glove compartment of Lisa's car, my hand brushing against something cold and metallic. I pulled out an expensive-looking men's watch. It was sleek, gold-plated, and completely unfamiliar. When I confronted Lisa about it over dinner, she didn't even flinch. "Oh, that," she laughed, waving a hand dismissively. "You asked me to pick out a gift for your boss, remember? I thought this one looked classy." Her explanation made sense. Sort of. Still, the memory of that watch lingered in my mind like a splinter I couldn't dislodge. A week later, I decided to surprise Lisa with an evening stroll. She'd been distant lately, claiming she needed time to herself. I thought a spontaneous date night might rekindle the spark between us. As I parked my car near the downtown promenade, I spotted a familiar figure through the glowing windows of an upscale restaurant. Lisa. She was laughing, her hand resting on the wrist of a sharply dressed man. They sat at a small, intimate table tucked in a corner of the restaurant, the golden light casting a warm glow on their faces. The man leaned forward, his hand covering hers, his smile as charming as hers was radiant. My stomach churned. I froze, unable to reconcile the woman I loved with the image before me. They were leaning in closer now, her eyes locked on his, her body language screaming in intimacy I'd never seen her share with anyone but me. I wanted to storm in, confront them, demand answers. But instead, I turned on my heel, walking briskly away as my heart pounded in my chest. My mind was a whirlwind of questions and doubts. Who was he? How long had this been going on? Why didn't she feel the need to hide it better? When I returned home later that evening, Lisa was already there, sitting cross-legged on the couch in her favorite oversized sweater. She greeted me with a bright smile and a cheerful, "Hey you, how was your day?" "It was fine," I replied, my voice distant. "How about you?" "Oh, exhausting," she sighed dramatically, running a hand through her hair. "Spent the whole day at the beauty salon. But at least now my hair doesn't look like a bird's nest." Her ease in line was like a dagger to my gut. I clenched my fists, swallowing the bile rising in my throat. Determined not to jump to conclusions, I forced myself to smile and nodded. "Looks great," I said, though my voice lacked enthusiasm. That night, as Lisa slept soundly beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her words echoed in my head, blending with the image of her with that man. I couldn't let this go. I needed answers. The next day, while Lisa hummed in the kitchen making breakfast, I began to formulate a plan. I'd always prided myself on being logical, methodical, a skill that served me well in finance. Now I was going to put those skills to use in my personal life. I ordered a set of discreet hidden cameras and audio recorders online. It felt extreme, invasive even, but I couldn't shake the memory of Lisa's laughter with that man. Her lies were seamless, and my gut told me I wouldn't get the truth by simply asking her. I needed proof. The equipment arrived a few days later, and while Lisa was out shopping, I got to work. I installed cameras in strategic locations: the living room, the kitchen, and most importantly, our bedroom. I placed an audio recorder in the glove compartment of her car and one inside her favorite purse. Each device synced to my phone, allowing me to monitor in real time. For a week, I found nothing. Lisa's movements were predictable, her behavior ordinary. I began to think I'd overreacted, that the man at the restaurant was a client or a friend. I even considered removing the devices altogether. Then, one evening, everything changed. Lisa had been out shopping for hours, and I decided to review the footage in the bedroom. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the playback. At first, nothing seemed unusual, just Lisa folding laundry and scrolling on her phone. But then he appeared, the man from the restaurant. He sat on our bed, laughing as Lisa poured 2 glasses of wine. They clinked their glasses together, his hand brushing hers as they sipped. My stomach turned when I heard Lisa's voice, clearly on the recording. "He won't understand anything," she said, smirking. "He's too naive. He just wants to work and not interfere with my life." The man chuckled, pulling her close. My heart shattered. There it was, the confirmation I had dreaded but couldn't deny. I slammed the laptop shut, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Rage boiled in my veins, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't over. Not yet. I needed more. The next morning, I started digging through our joint bank account. Lisa had been withdrawing small amounts, enough not to raise suspicion, but frequent enough to make a pattern. These withdrawals coincided with her outings, the ones she claimed were for errands or salon appointments. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, each one more damning than the last. The damning evidence weighed heavily on me, but I refused to act on impulse. If Lisa had so easily fooled me, she could just as easily manipulate our friends, family, or even a court if things escalated to that point. No, I needed to control the narrative, ensure there was no room for doubt. That morning, I called Lisa from work, my voice as steady as I could manage. "Hey, I was thinking," I said, masking my anger with feigned cheerfulness. "Our anniversary is coming up. What do you say we host a party? Just something small with family and close friends." She sounded genuinely thrilled. "That sounds wonderful, Mark. You're always so thoughtful. I'll handle the decorations." "Perfect," I replied, forcing a smile even though she couldn't see me. "Let's make it a night to remember." And it would be a night she would never forget. Over the next week, I fine-tuned every detail of my plan. The cameras stayed in place, capturing more of Lisa and her lover. Their rendezvous grew bolder, their conversations more revealing. In one video, Lisa mocked me, calling me a workaholic with no imagination. The man laughed, responding, "You deserve more. Someone who appreciates your charm." It felt like a knife twisting in my chest, but I held my composure. The footage was painful to watch, but it was also irrefutable. It would serve as my ace in the hole. When the night of the party arrived, our home was immaculately decorated. Lisa greeted guests with her signature charm, playing the role of the doting wife flawlessly. I watched her mingle, laugh, and steal glances at me as if nothing had changed. But I had changed. My love for her had been replaced by something cold, something resolute. As the evening unfolded, I made polite conversation with guests, ensuring everything seemed normal. When the time came for toasts, I raised my glass, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. "Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate our anniversary," I began. "Lisa and I have shared 7 wonderful years together, and I wanted to do something special to honor her." Lisa beamed at me, her cheeks flushed from the wine and attention. "But before we continue, I have a surprise," I said, gesturing toward the living room where a large screen was set up. "Lisa, this is for you." Her smile faltered slightly, confusion flickering across her face. "Mark, what are you?" The room fell silent as I pressed play. The footage from the hidden cameras appeared on the screen. Lisa's laughter, her words of disdain for me, and the image of her in our bed with her lover filled the room. Gasps erupted from the guests, the air thick with shock and disbelief. Lisa froze, her face draining of color. "Mark, she stammered, but her voice was drowned out by murmurs and whispers. "How could you?" her closest friend blurted out, tears welling in her eyes. Lisa tried to approach me, her hands outstretched in desperation. This isn't what it looks like. I can explain. But I stepped back, my voice cold and even. Don't. The footage speaks for itself. The room hung in stunned silence as the video finished playing. For a moment, it felt like time itself had stopped. Then came the murmurs, whispers turning into gasps of disbelief. Lisa stood there, frozen, her lips parted as if to say something. Anything, but no words came out. Her face flushed, and tears welled up in her eyes. I could see her mind racing, searching for a way to spin this, to salvage what was left of her shattered image. Mark, she finally managed, her voice trembling. I don't know what to say. Don't bother, I replied, my tone steely. You've already said enough in the videos. The crowd stirred uncomfortably. Some of our friends exchanged uneasy glances, while others openly glared at Lisa. Her parents, seated near the front, looked as if the ground had just disappeared beneath them. How could you do this to him, Lisa? One of her closest friends demanded, her voice thick with betrayal. To us? We all looked up to you. Lisa's hands trembled as she wiped at her tears, her face a mask of humiliation. It's not what it looks like, she pleaded, her voice cracking. I can explain, please, just let me explain. I raised a hand to silence her. Explain what? That you've been lying to me? Laughing behind my back? Sneaking around while I worked to give you everything? Her lips quivered, but she had no response. Then her lover, yes, him, had the audacity to try to step in. He cleared his throat, raising his hands in a mock gesture of peace. Look, Mark, I think we all need to calm down, he started, his voice smooth and condescending. This isn't as bad as it seems. That was it. The restraint I'd been clinging to finally snapped. Not as bad, I roared, my voice cutting through the room like a whip. You've been sleeping with my wife in my house, in my bed, and you have the nerve to tell me to calm down? He flinched, clearly not expecting the outburst. For all his swagger, he wasn't prepared to face the consequences of his actions. I turned back to the guests, my voice steadier now. I wanted you all to see this, because I refused to let her rewrite the story. Lisa's been living a double life, and I've been made a fool of. But no more. Her parents stood abruptly, their faces pale. Her mother clutched her husband's arm, whispering something frantic. They hurried out of the room without a word to Lisa, their shame etched clearly on their faces. The weight of the moment bore down on Lisa, and she fell to her knees, sobbing. Mark, please, she begged. Don't do this. I can fix it. I'll do anything. I stared at her, my chest hollow and my heart numb. It's too late for that. Lisa's sobs echoed in the now silent room. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some leaving quietly, others frozen in disbelief. Her lover stood awkwardly near the doorway, clearly contemplating an escape. I felt a twisted satisfaction watching him squirm, knowing the weight of the moment was crushing him too. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Lisa, I said firmly, my voice cutting through the tension. I trusted you. I built my life around you. But this? You didn't just betray me. You disrespected everything we stood for. Her tear-streaked face lifted toward me, desperation etched into every line. Mark, I'm sorry. I didn't mean. Stop. I interrupted, my tone resolute. Don't insult me with apologies now. You've had plenty of chances to come clean, to tell me the truth. But you didn't. You lied to my face and laughed at me behind my back. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came. She knew there was nothing she could say to undo what she'd done. I turned to her lover, locking eyes with him for the first time that night. And you, I said, my voice dripping with contempt. Do you have anything to say for yourself? He stammered, clearly caught off guard. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I cut him off with a sharp laugh. Didn't mean to cause trouble? You've been sleeping with a married woman in her husband's bed. You knew exactly what you were doing. He took a step back, his bravado utterly gone. Look, man, I'll leave. I won't come near her again. I swear. You're damn right you won't, I said, stepping closer, my eyes locked on his. But you're not walking out of here scot-free. Everyone here knows your name and your face. Good luck explaining that to your wife, if you have one, or your boss. He blanched, realizing the implications. Without another word, He turned and bolted out the door, leaving Lisa kneeling on the floor, her sobs growing louder. I turned back to the remaining guests, many of whom were still staring at me in stunned silence. "I appreciate you all coming tonight," I said, forcing a calm I didn't entirely feel. "But the party's over. Please, see yourselves out." They hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances, but one by one, they began to leave. Some muttered words of support or awkward apologies. Others avoided eye contact entirely, rushing out as if fleeing a crime scene. I couldn't blame them. Finally, it was just Lisa and me in the now empty living room. She looked up at me, her face red and swollen, her makeup smudged. "Mark," she whispered, her voice hoarse, "please don't leave me. I love you." I stared at her, the woman I had once adored more than life itself. But now, all I saw was the betrayal, the lies, the mockery. "You should have thought about that before," I said quietly. "I'll be staying in a hotel tonight. Tomorrow, I'll be speaking to a lawyer." Her eyes widened in panic. "No, Mark. Please, we can fix this. I'll do anything." I shook my head, my decision unshakable. "You've already done enough." I grabbed my coat and walked out, her cries following me into the cold night air. The hotel room was quiet, save for the faint hum of the air conditioner. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. Messages and missed calls from friends and family flooded the screen, all of them wanting answers or offering support. But I couldn't respond. Not yet. The chaos of the evening still rang in my ears. Lisa's sobs, the stunned gasps of our friends, her lover's pathetic attempt to escape the fallout. It all felt surreal, like I'd been dropped into someone else's life. I took a deep breath and opened my laptop. I wasn't going to wallow in the pain. I needed action, a plan. First, I drafted an email to a divorce attorney a colleague had recommended months ago when he'd gone through a messy split. The subject line was simple: urgent assistance needed. Next, I forwarded a few choice video clips and bank statements to my personal folder. They weren't just evidence. They were my shield against any attempt Lisa might make to twist the narrative. I wasn't going to let her spin this into a story of a distant husband or mutual fault. By the time I finished, the clock read 3 a.m. I should have been exhausted, but the adrenaline wouldn't let me rest. I lay back on the stiff hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening in my mind. Despite the whirlwind of emotions, one thought stood out above the rest. I wasn't coming back. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the blinds. The clarity of daylight brought a strange sense of calm. I picked up my phone and called Lisa's number. She answered immediately, her voice trembling. "Mark," she asked, as if afraid of what I might say. "Where are you?" "Somewhere I can think," I replied coldly. "I've contacted a lawyer. We'll be starting the divorce process." "No. Mark, please don't do this," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "I'll go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't throw this away." "You threw it away, Lisa," I said, my tone unwavering. "You threw it away every time you lied to me, every time you brought that man into our home. This isn't something you can fix with words." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, broken only by her muffled sobs. I hung up before she could say anything else. I wasn't ready to hear her excuses or her apologies. Over the next few days, word of what had happened spread quickly through our social circles. Friends reached out with messages of shock, sympathy, or awkward attempts at humor. Lisa's closest friends, those who had once admired her charm and wit, were furious. One even called me to apologize on her behalf, but I cut her off. "She made her choices," I said firmly. "Now she has to live with them." Lisa, meanwhile, was drowning in the fallout. Her family distanced themselves, horrified by her betrayal. Friends avoided her, unsure of how to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with the one in the videos. She tried reaching out to me multiple times, leaving long, rambling voicemails filled with tears and desperation. I didn't answer a single one. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I just couldn't hear her voice without the pain rushing back. The following weeks passed in a haze of paperwork and logistics. My lawyer, a sharp and compassionate woman named Rachel, assured me that with the evidence I had, the divorce would be straightforward. Lisa had little ground to stand on, and I made it clear I wanted a clean break. "You're handling this well, Mark," Rachel said during one of our meetings. "Most people would crumble under this kind of betrayal." "I don't feel strong," I admitted. "I feel empty." "That's normal," she replied with a sympathetic smile. "But you're taking the right steps to move forward. That takes courage." Her words offered some comfort, but the nights were still the hardest. Alone in my new apartment, the silence pressed down on me. Memories of Lisa haunted every corner of my mind. Her laugh, the way she used to hum while cooking, the way she'd once looked at me with love in her eyes. I'd loved her deeply, and now, that love felt like a cruel joke. The first glimmer of light came from an unexpected source, a gym down the street from my apartment. One evening, tired of staring at the walls, I decided to stop in and sign up. The owner, a friendly guy named Greg, welcomed me with a firm handshake and a knowing smile. "Rough day?" he asked. "Rough month," I replied. "Well, you've come to the right place," he said. "Nothing clears the mind like a good workout." I wasn't sure I believed him, but I gave it a shot. The first session was brutal. My muscles burned, and I felt like I might collapse after just a few minutes on the treadmill. But as the days turned into weeks, something shifted. The physical exertion became a release, a way to channel my anger and pain into something productive. Slowly but surely, I began to feel stronger, not just physically, but emotionally. As the divorce proceedings moved forward, I started setting new goals for myself. I poured more energy into my career, taking on challenging projects that had always intimidated me. To my surprise, my boss noticed and offered me a promotion. "We need someone with your focus and drive in this role," he said. "What do you think?" I accepted without hesitation. It felt good to accomplish something on my own terms, to rebuild my sense of self-worth after Lisa's betrayal. Lisa, meanwhile, wasn't faring as well. Word of her affair had spread beyond our circle, reaching her workplace and even her family's social circles. She became something of a pariah, her once shining reputation tarnished. I didn't revel in her downfall, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her either. She had made her choices. One day, I received a text from her. "Mark, I know I've hurt you, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry. For everything." I stared at the message for a long time before typing a reply. "I hope you find peace, Lisa. But I've moved on." It wasn't entirely true. I was still piecing my life back together. But writing those words felt like the first step toward letting go. Months passed, and though the pain lingered, it began to fade. Each day felt a little less heavy, as if the weight of Lisa's betrayal was finally loosening its grip on my heart. The divorce was finalized with little drama. Rachel made sure of that. I got the house, my savings were intact, and Lisa didn't contest my terms. For the first time in years, I felt free. One evening, while I was organizing my new apartment, I found an old photo album buried in a moving box. It was from our early years, Lisa and me smiling at the beach, holding hands on a hike, laughing at some forgotten inside joke. My chest tightened as I flipped through the pages, each memory a reminder of what we had been before it all fell apart. But as I closed the album, a realization washed over me. Those moments, as beautiful as they were, didn't define who I was now. I had loved deeply, yes, and I had been betrayed. But I had survived. I had rebuilt. I put the album back in the box and sealed it shut. It wasn't denial. It was a quiet acceptance that the past was exactly that, the past. Work became a sanctuary. The promotion brought new challenges, and I threw myself into them with a focus I hadn't felt in years. My team thrived under my leadership, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was making a real impact. One afternoon, my boss called me into his office. "Mark, I wanted to thank you," he said. "Your work on the Peterson account was phenomenal. The client's thrilled." "Thank you," I said, a genuine smile breaking across my face. "You've got a knack for this," he added. "Have you ever considered mentoring? I think you'd be great at it." The idea intrigued me. Mentoring would mean sharing what I'd learned, not just about finance, but about resilience, about how to navigate setbacks and keep moving forward. "I'd love to," I said. Outside of work, I started reconnecting with old friends. At first, I felt awkward and out of place, but they welcomed me back with open arms. One night, over drinks, my friend Ethan leaned over and said, "You seem different. Lighter." "I replied. "It's been a rough year, but I'm starting to feel like myself again." Ethan raised his glass. "To the new you." I clinked my glass against his, smiling for the first time in what felt like forever. The gym had become more than just a place to work out. It was a community. I'd made friends there, people who encouraged me, pushed me to keep going, and celebrated my progress. Greg, the owner, even convinced me to sign up for a charity 5K. "I've never run that far in my life," I said, laughing nervously. "There's a first time for everything," he replied with a grin. "Trust me, you'll feel amazing when you cross that finish line." And he was right. The day of the race, as I crossed the line drenched in sweat but grinning ear to ear, I felt a surge of pride. Not just for finishing the race, but for everything it represented: perseverance, growth, and a refusal to let the past define me. With the divorce behind me and a sense of stability returning to my life, I began to entertain the idea of opening my heart again. It wasn't an easy decision. Trust, once shattered, is not easily rebuilt. But I realized that holding on to bitterness wasn't hurting Lisa. It was only holding me back. My first attempt at dating was awkward. Friends tried setting me up, but the dinners were filled with stiff small talk and forced laughter. It wasn't their fault. I just wasn't ready. I needed more time to rediscover who I was without Lisa. Instead of diving headfirst into relationships, I focused on exploring parts of myself I'd neglected during my marriage. I signed up for photography classes, something I'd always wanted to try but had never made time for. The art of framing a shot, finding beauty in the mundane, became a form of therapy. It taught me to look at the world and myself through a different lens. One weekend, while photographing the sunrise at a local park, I met someone. Her name was Claire, a fellow photography enthusiast. She had a warm smile and an easy laugh that put me at ease instantly. We struck up a conversation about camera settings and lighting, and before I knew it, we were sharing stories about our lives. Claire had been through her own heartbreak, a failed engagement that left her cautious but hopeful. We bonded over our shared experiences, finding comfort in the fact that we weren't alone in our struggles. There was no pressure, no rush, just two people learning to trust again, one conversation at a time. Meanwhile, my relationships with family and friends deepened. My sister, who had always been my rock, surprised me with tickets to a weekend hiking trip. "You need this," she said, grinning as she handed me the itinerary. Fresh air, good views, and no cell service. The trip was exactly what I needed. Climbing those trails, surrounded by nature's beauty, felt like shedding the last remnants of my old life. At the summit, as I looked out over the endless horizon, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Claire and I continued to see each other, slowly building something real. She was patient, understanding when I hesitated and never pushing me to move faster than I was ready for. On our third date, she asked me a question that caught me off guard. "What's something you've always wanted to do, but never had the chance to?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. I thought for a moment before answering. "Travel. I've always dreamed of seeing the world, but work and life always got in the way." "Then let's start small," she said, smiling. "There's a festival in the city next weekend. Come with me. Let's explore together." That weekend, as we wandered through the vibrant stalls of the festival, I realized how far I'd come. Claire wasn't replacing Lisa. She was helping me rediscover parts of myself I'd forgotten existed. The boy who dreamed of adventures. The man who believed in second chances. For the first time in years, I felt ready to embrace the unknown. The festival with Claire was more than just a day out. It was a turning point. As we wandered through the bustling crowds, sampling food from colorful stalls and admiring handmade crafts, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. Claire's laugh was infectious, and her curiosity about the world reminded me of what it felt like to live in the moment. At one point, we stopped at a booth offering custom calligraphy. Claire picked up a piece of paper, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Pick a word, she said. Just one? Yep. Something that means something to you. Something you want more of in your life. I hesitated, the weight of the question surprising me. After a moment, I smiled and said, freedom. She handed the word to the artist, who painted it in bold, elegant strokes. When she handed it to me, Claire grinned. Keep that somewhere, you'll see it every day. And I did. Back home, I placed a framed word on my desk. It became a daily reminder that I was no longer tethered to the past, that I was free to shape my own future. My time with Claire wasn't just about romance. It was about rediscovering who I was outside of my marriage. She encouraged me to try new things, from paddleboarding, where I spent more time in the water than on it, to cooking a meal from scratch, which surprisingly didn't burn. Each new experience chipped away at the walls I'd built around myself. But what struck me most was Claire's patience. She never pressed for more than I could give, and that made me feel safe in a way I hadn't expected. One evening, as we sat by a lake watching the sun dip below the horizon, I finally opened up about Lisa. I loved her, I admitted, the words heavy but cathartic. I gave her everything I had, and it wasn't enough. Claire didn't offer platitudes or try to dismiss my pain. Instead, she placed her hand on mine and said, "It says more about her than it ever did about you." Her words settled into my chest like a bomb. She was right. Lisa's betrayal wasn't a reflection of my worth. It was a reflection of her choices. Over time, my life began to feel whole again. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. Work flourished under my leadership, and my photography hobby turned into a side gig. I started booking small events, capturing moments for people who reminded me of where I'd been and how far I'd come. Claire and I took things slow, but our connection deepened. One evening, over a quiet dinner at her apartment, she looked at me with a mix of hope and vulnerability. "Do you think you'll ever be ready to trust again?" she asked softly. I took her hand in mine, squeezing gently. "I think I already am." One day, I ran into Lisa at the grocery store. She looked different, tired, older. Her eyes lit up with recognition, but there was a hesitation in her step as she approached me. "Mark," she said, her voice tentative. Hi, Lisa," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. There was an awkward pause before she spoke again. "I heard you're doing well. You look happy." "I am," I said simply. "I've moved on." She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm glad. You deserve that." As I walked away, I felt no anger, no bitterness, just a quiet sense of closure. Months turned into a year, and the pain of the past became just a faint echo in my life. The moments that once haunted me no longer held power. They were lessons, not chains. I had rebuilt not just my life, but myself. The person I saw in the mirror now was stronger, more resilient, and more willing to embrace the unknown. One crisp autumn evening, Claire invited me to a gallery event showcasing local photographers. I didn't think much of it at first, just another excuse to spend time with her. But when we arrived, I was floored. One section of the gallery featured my work, carefully curated and displayed with plaques detailing each image's story. I turned to Claire, stunned. "You did this." She smiled, her eyes glowing with pride. "I may have made a few calls. Your work deserves to be seen, Mark." As I walked through the gallery, listening to people admire my photographs, a realization struck me. This wasn't just a milestone for my art. It was a testament to how far I'd come. The man who once doubted everything now stood tall, proud of what he'd created. A few weeks later, while walking through the same park where we'd first met, I stopped Claire beneath a canopy of vibrant fall leaves. She tilted her head, her expression curious. "What's on your mind?" she asked. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. Her eyes widened as I opened it, revealing a simple yet elegant ring. "Claire," I began, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. "You came into my life when I thought I'd lost everything. You didn't just help me heal, you helped me grow. I've never been more certain of anything in my life than this. I want to spend the rest of it with you. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, her smile brighter than the autumn sun. "Yes," she whispered, throwing her arms around me. As we planned our future together, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me to this point. Lisa's betrayal had shattered my world, but it had also forced me to rebuild it. I was no longer the man who had stood helpless in the face of her lies. I was someone new, someone stronger, wiser, and more open to life's possibilities. One evening, as Claire and I sat on the porch of my newly renovated home, I looked out at the horizon, feeling a peace I hadn't known in years. "Do you regret any of it?" she asked softly, her head resting on my shoulder. I thought for a moment before answering. I don't regret loving Lisa, but I also don't regret letting her go. If I hadn't, I wouldn't be here now with you. She smiled, squeezing my hand. Then it was worth it. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Life moves on, but scars remain. They remind us where we've been, but they don't have to define where we're going. Betrayal may have been my breaking point, but it wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, love, and the promise of brighter days ahead. What do you guys think of my story? Share in the comments what you think about the choice I made, and what would you do in my situation.